Now, Senators Dan Sullivan and Kevin Cramer introduced a very detailed bill on the missile defense shield. Had a lot of very specific areas that they wanted to pursue. Um, it also would authorize 19.5 billion for FY26, which comes to nearly twice as much as MDA's request of 10.4 billion in FY25 for their entire budget. So that's a lot of money in FY26. Given what we've heard about, potential to slash the defense budget, I don't know how true that is yet, but how does this stuff get accomplished? That's a huge amount of money in 1 year. What are your thoughts about affording to do some of these things initially?
Why don't I go at
Mark.
that first,
Yeah,
Brad?
Mark, take that. Yeah.
So look, we just saw Senator Sullivan's, eponymous Iron Dome Act, looking to do the executive order. I think it short circuits the process. There's a lot of good ideas in there. There's ideas that we can talk about with dirigibles, with how to do hypersonic defense, with space-based elements of defense. But 70% of the budget is tied up in GBI, ground-based intercept fields for the traditional North Korean, Iranian threat. So I don't think that's the eventual plan that's going to come from MDA or the eventual legislation that's going to come from Congress. I think there may be some investments in GBI, but it's not going to be 12, 13, 14 billion dollars. And it's not going to be 60, 70% centered in Alaska. It's going to end up being a broader effort that gets at these unique developments by China and Russia that drive the president's thinking on this to do an Iron Dome. So it'll be helpful. It gets the juices flowing in Congress. It'll get discussions in the Senate Armed Services Committee. And I think elements of that bill will find themselves in the FY26 National Defense Authorization Act. But I think the largest components of it are probably going to be trimmed or removed.
What components do you think have the most promise to end up in the final version of the bill?
So I think we have to review the glide phase intercept decision. So there are two ways to do glide phase intercept. I mean, there were two programs going. We down selected a little early last summer. One of them
about a year early, correct?
Yeah, correct. And so what happened is there was two programs. One of them will deliver glide phase intercept. So that's our ability to intercept a hypersonic cruise missile in the glide phase. Congress ordered DoD to have that done by 2029. There was a program that could be done by 2029. It probably is not the best system. There's a second system that can deliver in the mid-2030s that is a pretty cool system. The problem, of course, is we can't call Russia and China and say, could you slow your roll? We need an extra 4 or 5 years. The right solution was to continue to work both, go into low rate production on the first one, turn to the second company and say, look, you got a better product. If you can deliver on time or early, we'll order more of your product. Historically, on time and early are not the two choices on the bingo card for delivery of complex weapon systems. But, in other words, put competition in the process. Look, MDA couldn't do that because DoD didn't give enough money to proceed with both. They basically forced it. So I think the immediate things are redressal of that decision, fully fund both programs in terms of research and development for one and low rate production for the other, and get moving. If I could give you one other that really needs to be done is dirigibles and aerostats. We had dirigibles, over DC protecting us in a system called Army system called JLENS. It's basically an enormous firing quality track radar. It could be a TPY-2, it could be something else at 10, 20, 40,000 feet. Brad as an aviator, my wife is a naval aviator, they know being at altitude has a big advantage on radar ranges versus, say, my Aegis ship that I commanded. So we understand the value of this altitude. They're unmanned, their cost is lower, their production costs end up being lower. You don't need as many environmental impact studies. All these kind of things lend itself to dirigibles. What doesn't lend itself to dirigibles is they're not cool. So no service goes and hugs them. Seriously, this is the issue. It's a sense the Army walked away after a zero casualty incident from this system. On the other hand, the Israelis have it. We're selling them to Poland, telling them they need them for their defense against Russia. It turns out we're going to need them, and we're not going to need one or two. We're going to need dozens. They won't all be up at the same time, but with them around Alaska, in New England, down on our southern border, a few other places, these dirigibles will give us firing quality track solutions to inbound cruise missiles and some support against the hypersonic missiles. So for me, those two big investments are things you could do now. They exist. and get moving. And so I expect MDA in their first epoch and the fiscal year 26 and budget to kind of reflect those two at a minimum.